Imagine someone hands you, like, a loaded M16, a Kevlar bulletproof vest, and a remarkably sharp sword.
You'd probably feel pretty dangerous.
Right. But what if I told you that simply learning how to write makes you, I mean, infinitely more deadly than all three of those combined?
It completely upends how we view power. And
Right.
honestly, it fractures our conventional understanding of what it actually means to be a quote-unquote good person.
Because we usually equate goodness with being harmless, right? Like we picture someone gentle, accommodating someone who wouldn't hurt a fly.
Exactly.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are exploring a deeply counterintuitive concept from a transcript of a motivational speech by Jordan Peterson.
Yes, specifically focusing on this idea he calls the art of being dangerous.
Right. And the core argument here is that a harmless person is not a good person at all. A
Yeah.
truly good person is actually a highly dangerous person who just, keeps that danger under strict voluntary control.
It demands a total paradigm shift. I mean, it takes
Yeah.
our standard definition of virtue and injects it with this really intense martial requirement for absolute competence.
Yeah, he really does. But before we get into the trenches with this, let's just set a quick ground rule for our mission today.
Always a good idea.
Our goal is to unpack the psychological and philosophical architecture presented in this specific text. We're acting as your guides to the original material's logic. So, regardless of where this sits on any, political or cultural spectrum, we aren't here to take sides or endorse a broader worldview.
Right, we are just impartially examining this framework to see what underlying mechanisms make it tick.
Exactly.
Requires us to redefine our terms right out of the gate. We have to establish what kind of danger the source is actually referring to.
And spoiler alert, it has absolutely nothing to do with physical aggression or martial arts or like lifting weights.
No, not all.
It is entirely about vocabulary. It's
Yeah.
about articulation. The text explicitly equates becoming articulate with building an array of weaponry.
And the mechanism behind this is just fascinating. Like, why does speech equal power? The source argues that if you are a master at formulating your arguments, you win everything.
Win everything. That's a strong claim.
It is. But we need to look at the how here. Articulation isn't just about sounding smart at a dinner party. Language is how we organize the chaos of the world into, manageable pieces.
Right.
When you can formulate a coherent argument, you are effectively mapping reality better than the people around you.
You're defining the territory. And whoever defines the territory, well, they control the board.
Exactly. And consider how society reacts to that level of clarity. When you speak and lay out a proposal clearly, people respond to that underlying competence.
They give you capital.
They give you capital, they offer opportunities. You gain influence not through tyranny or force, but because you've demonstrated that you understand how to navigate complex problems.
The text actually calls this power of the best sort, like authority rooted in respectability and competence.
Because the alternative to this kind of articulate danger isn't being nice. The alternative is being weak.
And weakness makes you a victim of circumstance. So for you listening to this right now, I want you to think about why you actively try to acquire knowledge. Like by listening to this deep dive.
Right.
You weren't just collecting trivia for a pub quiz. According to this framework, you are literally building your personal armor. You are assembling an intellectual arsenal so you can hold your ground and take your proper place in the world.
It totally reframes the entire motivation for education. It stops being about passing a test or getting your credential and starts being about rendering yourself so formidable that the world cannot easily push you aside.
But knowing that articulation is your primary weapon kind of raises the immediate question of how you actually forge it.
Yeah, the practical application.
Because the source claims you must first ruthlessly strip away your own ignorance.
Hmm.
And I read this and immediately hit a roadblock.
Oh yeah, what was the roadblock?
Well, if the goal is to be formidable and deadly, why does the speaker emphasize asking stupid questions and publicly confessing your flaws? Doesn't revealing your ignorance to a room full of people make you look weak instead of dangerous?
I get that. It feels like weakness because our ego is wired to protect our current status. But the source presents this really compelling mathematical logic to justify the temporary pain of looking foolish.
Okay, walk me through the math.
Well, if you sit in a room, ask 1,000 dumb questions, and actually listen to the answers, you instantly acquire 1,000 new pieces of data.
Wow. So you're essentially executing an arbitrage. You're buying permanent knowledge at the incredibly cheap price of your temporary pride.
That is a great way to put it. And you do this to hunt down the errors you are completely in love with. The text takes this concept of self-correction into pretty extreme territory with what we can call the 5% rule.
Right, the 5% rule.
It presents a hypothetical where the world is entirely conspiring against you. Like, your failure was 95% the fault of external occurrences, bad luck, other people.
And we have all been in that headspace.
Oh.
The deck was stacked. It wasn't my fault.
Exactly.
But wait, let me push back on this a little bit. Because if my business partner, say, embezzles all our company's money, telling me to obsess over my 5% of the fault feels a lot like victim blaming.
Right, it feels unfair.
Yeah. How does the framework reconcile that? Does it just let the perpetrator off the hook?
Not at all. It's a crucial psychological distinction regarding your locus of control. Focusing on the 95% that was the embezzler's fault might be morally accurate, but it is functionally useless to your future growth.
Because you can't control their actions.
Exactly. You can't control them. The quote-unquote dangerous person relentlessly searches for their own 5% of the blame because that is the only territory they can actually govern. They ask, what accounting irregularity did I ignore? Where did my judge of character fail?
So it's not about absolving the other person. It's about ensuring you never get taken out by that specific vulnerability ever again.
Right. It's an agonizing process. You are actively hunting for your own insufficiency. But once you rectify that 5% error, you seal a crack in your armor. You move forward fundamentally stronger and less ignorant.
Think about the physical reaction you have when someone exposes a flaw in your work. I mean, your heart rate spikes, you get super defensive.
Oh, absolutely. Fight or flight kicks in.
But if you reframe that painful moment as an upgrade, like as someone handing you a new piece of armor, rectifying that error is what actually makes you formidable.
And achieving that baseline of self-awareness brings us to the next requirement in the text. Plotting your trajectory. You have to figure out where you actually are and where you are going.
Which demands literal articulation, writing your own story down.
Yes.
The analogy that jumps out here for me is a GPS system. You can own the most advanced satellite navigation technology on the planet, and you can know exactly what exotic destination you want to reach. But if that GPS cannot pinpoint your current coordinates, it cannot plot a route. The system is just paralyzed.
That's spot on. The source asks, how are you going to plot a pathway to the future unless you know where you are? You have to map your character and the definitive events that shaped your current coordinates.
But there's a catch, right?
A big one. The text points out a fascinating human tendency. We deliberately avoid doing this. We keep our past and our future intentionally foggy.
Which is so weird. Why prefer the fog? It seems totally counterproductive if the goal is success.
Because clarity brings accountability.
Oh, right.
If you specify exactly what you want, you simultaneously define your exact conditions of failure. If your goal remains this vague, foggy concept, like, I just want to be successful in my career, you never really know if you're failing.
You shield yourself from the sting of defeat.
Exactly. But if you articulate, I want to reach this specific metric by next Tuesday, and Tuesday passes without hitting the mark, well, you failed. The fog protects the ego from that terror.
So we basically trade the ability to actually hit a target for the comfort of never missing one.
That's a really stark way to look at it, but yes. And this fog doesn't just obscure the future, it deeply obscures the past.
Yeah, let's talk about the past.
The text introduces a highly specific, almost clinical metric regarding this. The speaker asserts that if you have a memory older than 18 months, and bringing it to mind still causes a negative emotional impact, part of your soul is stuck back there.
Part of your soul is stuck back there. Man, that is a haunting phrase. Let's break down the psychology of what that actually means.
Well, from a neurological and clinical perspective, if a memory from a year and a half ago still triggers a physiological response, like your stomach dropping or your palm sweating, your amygdala is treating that memory as an active, ongoing threat.
It hasn't filed it away as the past.
Exactly. It views it as a part of your territory that you failed to master, and it's keeping the alarm bells ringing to protect you.
The alarm bell just won't shut off because you haven't solved the puzzle of why it happened.
Right. And the source acknowledges these might be genuinely traumatic situations. You know, you may have tangled with someone deeply malevolent. But the harsh reality presented is that until you articulate the event, until you write it down, dissect it, and construct what the text calls a theory of malevolence, you remain a prisoner to it.
Okay, a theory of malevolence. What does that actually look like in practice?
It basically means building a functional understanding of human darkness based on your experience. If you were profoundly betrayed, a theory of malevolence means you now understand exactly the psychological mechanisms of deception, how the betrayer operated, and the warning signs you completely missed.
So you extract the wisdom from the trauma.
Yes, you
Wow.
write it out to master it, turning the threat into a mapped, understood territory.
I really have to challenge you, the listener, on this. Are you keeping your goals vague today just so you never have to admit when you fall short? And more importantly, are there memories from over a year and a half ago that still spike your heart rate?
It's a tough question to face.
Because according to this psychological architecture, until you articulate those memories, your brain will continue to treat you as prey.
But, achieving that internal clarity creates a dangerous new temptation.
Of course it does.
Let's say you do the hard work. You clear the fog, map your past, formulate your future. The immediate ego trap is looking out the window and thinking, I fixed me, now I'm going to step out and fix the rest of the world.
Oh, man, yeah. And the source throws a massive glowing red stop sign in front of that impulse. And it uses what is easily the most vivid metaphor in the entire transcript.
The chimp with a wrench.
The chimp with a wrench. It says, trying to fix a complex society when you barely have your own life together is like a chimp with a wrench whacking a military helicopter thinking, whack! Oh, look, it's better!
It's a hilarious image, but it illustrates a profound concept regarding complex systems. A military helicopter is a pinnacle of interconnected engineering. If you don't understand avionics, aerodynamics, and fluid dynamics, hitting the rotor with a wrench doesn't just fail to fix it. It causes catastrophic downstream failures.
You send the whole thing crashing into the ground.
Yeah.
And society is infinitely more complex than a helicopter.
Which is why the source establishes a very strict, humbling hierarchy of responsibility. You don't start with the helicopter. Step one is admitting that you are a fixer-upper. You repair your own immediate flaws.
Okay, step one, fix yourself.
Right. Once you manage that, step two is not society. Step two is your family. You must attempt the incredibly difficult task of making peace with, as the text affectionately puts it, your idiot brother.
Which is brutally hard because your family knows exactly how to push your buttons. Managing the micro-complexity of a family dynamic is an absolute nightmare.
Oh, for sure. The text is very pragmatic about this, too. It notes that achieving family peace might actually reduce your opportunities for spiteful revenge during the holidays.
Which is a real pain in the neck, apparently.
Yeah. But the underlying lesson is vital. If you cannot negotiate peace with 3 people who share your genetics, what immense arrogance makes you think you can re-engineer the macroeconomic policies of millions of strangers?
That is such a gut punch.
It is. It's only after you've mastered the family dynamic that you earn the right to put a tentative finger out to change some small thing in society.
So it's progression of competence. You prove you aren't a chimp with a wrench on a small scale before you get anywhere near the helicopter. And this entire progression forces a massive choice on how we live our lives.
It presents an ultimate dichotomy. You can choose a meaningful life, defined here as a life where everything you do matters. But the cost of meaning is that you have to carry the heavy burden of responsibility for all of it. Every action has weight.
Or you choose the alternative.
Right. You choose meaninglessness, you wander through life avoiding responsibility, just gratifying impulsive desires. You carry no heavy burden because nothing you do matters. But, you are ultimately consumed by the suffering and nihilism of that meaninglessness.
Yeah. And to take on the burden of responsibility, to choose the meaningful path, requires absolute commitment. But as I read through this, I hit another snag.
What was that?
The text brings up a dilemma called the moral hazard. If you commit to a difficult path and halfway down you realize it might be the wrong path, how do you distinguish between wisely pivoting away from a mistake and just using it's the wrong path as a rationalization to quit because it got too hard?
It's a great question because we lie to ourselves constantly to avoid discomfort. The moral hazard is exactly that, the danger of self-deception. But the source provides a razor-sharp heuristic to test your own motives.
Okay, what's the rule?
You are only allowed to change course if the next thing you do is equally or more difficult.
Wow. So what does that lateral pivot actually look like in the real world?
Let's say you are 3 years into a grueling law degree, and you have a genuine crisis of conscience. You realize you despise the practice of law. The rule dictates that you cannot quit law school to sit on your parents' couch and find yourself. You can't pivot downward into comfort. You must pivot laterally or upward.
So you leave law school, but you immediately enroll in a rigorous data science boot camp, or you start a really demanding business.
Precisely. That entirely removes the loophole of laziness. If the new path is just as brutal as the old one, you know you aren't quitting out of weakness. You are genuinely course correcting.
That is brilliant. It forces you to maintain the momentum of your own competence. But to maintain that momentum over an entire lifetime, the text suggests you need a driving force. You need an adversary, a nemesis.
This is where the framework turns sharply inward. It is so easy and incredibly common to look externally for a nemesis.
Oh, absolutely. To demonize a political group, an ideology, or a specific person and turn them into the ultimate villain so you have a crusade to fight.
Externalizing the enemy is the default setting of modern discourse. But the text argues that fighting external phantoms is a lesser battle. It usually indicates you are projecting your own unaddressed flaws onto the world. The true nemesis is internal.
The quote is, "You just look inside, you'll find something to grapple with. Inadequacy, weakness, pride, resentment, a lack of faith."
It touches on the psychological concept of integrating the shadow, mixed with an ancient theological question the source raises. Why does an adversary even exist? Like, why is there a snake in the garden to begin with?
Because a garden with a snake in it is actually superior to a garden without one.
Exactly. If there is no snake, there is no threat. If there is no threat, there is no necessity to be awake.
That makes total sense.
The internal nemesis, your own capacity for malevolence, laziness, and deceit, is the snake. The struggle against it is what sharpens your articulation, builds your competence, and forces you into consciousness. You are ultimately better for having faced the challenge.
So the infinite game between order and chaos isn't fought on a battlefield out in the world. It is fought entirely within your own mind.
Yes.
Which brings us full circle. To be a good person isn't to sit harmlessly in a walled garden, totally ignorant of the snakes. It is to recognize the snakes within yourself, to arm yourself with the power of articulation, and to voluntarily control that formidable, deadly danger.
It's a really profound call to radical internal responsibility. Stop looking outward for enemies to blame and start looking inward for that 5% you can actually control and rectify.
Well, we've covered a lot of deep psychological ground today. From realizing that our ability to formulate arguments is our most potent weapon, to clearing the protective fog of our past so we don't remain paralyzed by old threats.
A lot of heavy lifting.
Seriously. We learned why we need to drop the wrench and stop trying to re-engineer the complex helicopter of society until we've actually managed to fix ourselves and our families. And finally, we saw that our ultimate battle is against our internal nemesis, ensuring we never pivot downward into comfort.
It's a heavy framework, but a powerful one.
Absolutely. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on everything we just explored. If our greatest nemesis truly is internal, and if our most powerful weapon is our ability to clearly articulate the truth, what is the one difficult conversation you are actively avoiding having with yourself today?
Keep aiming true.
We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.